How are y'all doing? Woo! Woo! We need some more energy. So as Damien mentioned, I'm Linda Bethea. I am the head of marketing at Danone North America. And we have a really exciting panel today on the future of CPG marketing. Now, I don't have a crystal ball, but luckily we pulled together a great lineup of panelists who hopefully have some really good insights into this topic. But we'll start by letting them introduce themselves and their industry so you can see the breadth of knowledge that we have on the panel today. So start with you, Fabrice.
Hi, I'm Fabrice with IntentIQ, responsible for strategy and partnerships. We are a identity resolution technology pioneer. What we do helps marketers in CPG and other verticals build their privacy agenda for targeting and reaching customers on any screen, any device, with the anticipation of June 2024 deadline where all those cookies are going to go away.
Thank you, Fabrice. And I'm Elli Dimitroulakos. I'm global head of ad innovation at Acast, which is the second largest global podcast marketplace, and founded in Sweden in 2014. My role there is to bring innovation for monetization of podcasts across the globe through things like addressability, new ad formats, measurability, and ad targeting.
And hey everybody, Jeff Williams, vertical strategy lead, CPG and Pharma at InMobi, mobile in-app advertising platform. I went to school for CPG at Michigan State, food industry management, then over to IRI, years at Quotient, Velasas. I love it, live it, and breathe it. So looking forward to this panel.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so let's start our discussion with the C word. No, not that one, the consumer. We're on a CPG panel, people. And I think it's critical for all of us in this industry to be consumer-centric. So I'll start with you, Jeff, down there. How do you keep a finger on the pulse of the consumer and make sure you're maintaining that consumer centricity?
It's a great point on consumer first, and especially as even throughout the last couple of days of content, we hear and see so much about the different platforms and techniques and content and things like that. The root of it all is what's going on with consumers right now, and that's not one-dimensional, right? That's not just how consumers are engaging with TikTok or Instagram or Snap. It's what's affecting the consumers. So it's certainly economical right now. What's happening, and you see anywhere from $600 to $900 impact in their grocery bills. So in CPG space, it's what are their trade-offs? What are the behavior changes that are going on with consumers? And it's happening in a lot of different ways. Not only how consumers are digesting and ingesting content, but ultimately, what are their decisions and how much are they becoming needs-based in their decisioning, especially for the products they're putting in their grocery stores?
Yeah, for us, it's a lot of taking a lot of that data that's offline, that's general, and bringing it back to our creator economy. When we listen to our hosts, they speak a lot about these issues or troubles that they're facing, and they have a voice, and that voice is powerful. It attracts other people who also feel the same way and are endeavoring or experiencing these negative economic impacts. So we actually turn to our creators and ask them, what is a valuable conversation for you? What are you facing? What are your audiences interested in learning about or hearing about? And we use that to help them elevate that voice, but also connect to that community. And then we also do what we call matchmaking with the brands, bringing in the brands that are also very connected to that same value. And I think I've coined this, I don't know if it's an original thought, but I've coined this like value-based marketing, because a lot of the consumers we talk to and a lot of the hosts are very,
Write that down, folks, value-based marketing. You heard it here first.
And it's not about the product features as much as it is the value. Are you a sustainable organization? Are you focused on green and clean? What are you doing in this socioeconomic environment? How are you lifting marginalized communities? So those are very central to a lot of what we're hearing from our consumers and our creators.
Yeah, I guess I'll add maybe a little more technology-oriented dimension by saying one way to keep the pulse is data, as we all know, and collecting data. And it's called first-party data, it's called third-party data. How do you mix and match it? What can you do with it? And there are a few tectonic plates, shifting right now in that space, but certainly that is an essential way. And big tech agendas are not necessarily serving or helping marketers in that area. Some big tech companies, maybe we can talk about it later, but tracking companies or tracking consumers may have different versions depending on who is actually doing it. So definitely the ability to create a marketer's own identity spine to understand who their audiences are, understand what privacy regulations are affecting the way they can use that to engage consumers. We're seeing that as an essential piece of moving forward.
So you mentioned data privacy. As a marketer, that's a very hot topic. We talk about it weekly at Danone. How can marketers overcome some of the challenges inherent in that as consumers get more and more concerned about how their data is being used?
For me? Yeah. So certainly, third-party cookies have been kind of overused and abused, and that has created an opposite reaction. What we're seeing now is a lot of regulation coming up, and it's changing. And it used to be CCPA in the US, and now we've got 3 or 4 different states coming up with their own version of regulation. So there is a lot of things here, and the IAB, you might know, has created what's called a global privacy platform now that is going to be kind of the thing moving forward. Am I stealing
Elli
someone's thunder?
apparently works for them.
Oh, yes. We're getting direction on the microphone.
Eat the mic. Is
Eat
that
the
phrase?
mic.
We need to eat the mic.
How does that feel?
It's delicious.
All right.
Oh, nice.
All right. Let's do this. Where was I? So there are lots of regulatory initiatives. It's important to stay abreast of those. And then there is also technology, that is able to do things nowadays. We help marketers target in Safari environment, in CTV environments, even though there are no more cookies. But the key is to do it respecting consent and respecting regulation. So it's that mix.
Yeah, privacy is important to everyone, including myself. Even though we work in a non-cookieless environment, podcasts operate through RSS tech, so we don't have cookies. We're very privacy safe, if you will, but that doesn't mean that the job ends there. We're very involved with organizations that are solving for this to create consent and regulations, including organizations like the IAB. And then we want to understand from the brand's perspective, how are they thinking about data? How are they gathering that data so that we can safely bring it into our ecosystem and connect what they're seeing and hearing from their consumers with the voices of our hosts. So I think even though there's a level of safeguarding where we play in the podcast ecosystem, I think as a whole, as an industry, we need to think about that together so that we can raise awareness around consent and things like that. And I've also seen some companies surface now where they're actually enabling consumers to monetize their data and decide how it's monetized and decide how it's shared. So that's very interesting. I'm curious to see what kind of data we get back from something like that.
Last, just to add on a quick element, agreed, but I also think it comes back to the consumer point that we started with, right? What does the consumer want? What is the consumer okay with sharing? And especially in CPG, not to take a shot at CPG, I love it dearly, but we tend to overthink things. We're going to go out and find the left-handed albino cat owner who only eats on Wednesdays. We get so hyper-specific because we can, we lose sight of whether or not we should. And the reality is a lot of our products are pretty mass appeal. Yes, targeting is a phenomenal thing, but the specificity that we'll sometimes seek is more than is necessary.
Marketers never overthink things, Jeff. I don't know what you're saying. So, Jeff, you touched on the economic climate right now, right? And I think the past few years have seen the biggest shift in terms of consumer sentiment as a result of the pandemic, all of the social justice movements, and current economic uncertainty. And as a result of that, there's been a big shift in behaviors. Which consumer shifts do you think are here to stay, and which ones do you think are fads?
It's a good one. I think we've seen a couple of things. One, the normalization of kind of getting back to what that e-commerce trajectory was naturally going to be on. You're seeing a lot of the reports about how e-com is taking a downturn. It isn't taking a downturn. It's eased off of its kind of hyper growth that we saw. Two things that come to mind are private label and value-based, but not necessarily...
Value-based marketing, perhaps?
Not necessarily in that way. I mean it more from how brands are connecting with consumers in a value-based. Like ID, stands for delighting and making that coffee experience better. Coke is happiness and refreshment. Kraft Mac and Cheese right now is leaning in really aggressively on comfort. So how do they create these emotive, value-based connections with consumers? I think that we'll continue to see that, especially during the economic downturn. And the other part is private label. In 2008, when we had the decline, economic slowdown, CPGs tend to do well during a downturn. Consumers eat out less, they go out less, hence they're eating more at home. CPG rises. CPG rose about 5.6% in 2008. Private label rose almost 20%. And we're already seeing that in Q1 of 23. Is that similar dynamic? Except what's exacerbating that, and sorry, not doom and gloom for brands. It's just recognizing the consumer shift. And the part of that is, you look at private labels now. I think Target has north of $10 billion private label brands. So these aren't being marketed as store brands anymore. They're true competitive brands that you've got to be aware of and be really attentive to, and I think they are across the space. It's not just cheaper knockoffs; it's quality brands. So I think consumers are going to continue to seek value in emotive forms and potentially cost savings.
Yeah, it's definitely not all doom and gloom, but it is a challenge for marketers to figure out how to add that value versus private label. Is data something we can leverage to try to understand how to add value, Fabrice?
Of course, big time. I mean, data is really the source today of hyper-personalization, ability to be omni-channel. If you don't retain and collect data and have smart ways to combine it, to have your own view of who it is that you are reaching to and what attributes they have, you're going to get lost in this fragmented media landscape, and it's going to be very hard to compete and differentiate and create value for those consumers.
So you talked about omni-channel marketing. I know that's another buzzword in the industry these days, and we are definitely looking at expanding our marketing mix, but there's a challenge in doing so while still driving reach and scale and maintaining your objectives. So Elli, I know yesterday we talked a little bit about this and the rise of streaming audio and podcasting. Can you talk about how your industry is addressing those challenges with scale and reach?
Of course, yeah, happy to. Historically, podcasts were bought on a show-per-show basis, and what we found was that it created an aggregation of demand on the top 500 shows only, and because of that, it was increasing CPMs, saturating ad loads, and decreasing the actual value back to the advertiser, because not only were you paying more for it, but the user experience was decreasing. So we found that by enabling content signals and understanding the content these consumers are very interested in, and then marrying that with data, so we understand where the brand's loyal customers live in that funnel, and understanding at which part of the purchase funnel they're in, we're able to do what we call a matchmaking, and marry the side of the creator with the side of the data to find the right listener at the right place and time. And the good thing about that is the user experience remains safe. So we don't want to ruin podcasting by doing things we've done in display and video, for example. We're very, very cognizant of that. And listeners will drop off very quickly if you're disruptive. But the magic of it is it actually surfaced to us data that shows us that 88% of the addressable audiences in podcasting were being overlooked entirely because of perception buying. So buying only the host you're familiar with, buying only the content you're familiar with. And especially with brands that have dedicated resources to DEI initiatives, those communities were overlooked entirely because they're not large. they're niche, and that's the magic of them. And so we've kind of been able to look at bringing a lot of that decisioning from the content and the creator into the data with the consumer to create scale and create new ad formats so that you can reach these users in a more addressable and also a more like automated fashion. Expanding thus, like even discoverability, like finding hosts that really do perform well for your brand and advocate for it on your behalf. So it leads to influencer, which is really the mecca of what podcasting we're built on. Yeah.
That's great to hear. Danone has a huge commitment to DEI, and we're always struggling to find minority-owned outlets, influencers, et cetera, at scale.
Yeah.
So good to hear.
Hard.
Also related to omni-channel is the rise of retail media. And Jeff, I know we were talking about some of the challenges inherent as that, as more and more marketers are being pressured to increase their spend there. I know personally, Walmart would like us to spend all of our dollars with Walmart Connect. And so how can marketers think about leveraging retail media as part of an omni-channel strategy?
Not shocking to hear at Walmart. Yeah, it's a boom, and it's a boom because it's working really hard, which is the good news, right? Retail media networks have been performing, which is great. It's really compressing the funnel. There's a lot less funnel talk, I would say, as the funnel gets compressed and really everything becomes shoppable. Everything becomes a little bit of commerce, which is why you're seeing the commerce teams kind of blow up across agencies and partners and things like that. The slippery slope is there's a lot going on offsite. There's only so much scale and reach within outside of the Amazons and Walmarts of the world, but you get into that mid and long tail retail media networks, and it gets to be a little bit of a challenge. And they're serving a lot more offsite, which when you look at what your national programmatic buy might look like and what you're doing offsite, and I'll speak for myself. I shop. I'm local. Welcome to Austin. But I'm shopping H-E-B, Target, occasionally Walmart, Amazon. I'm hitting a lot of those channels to where those dollars are going. All those retailers are competing to send me a unique signal for the brands, along with the national programmatic. So, just controls, and where I think for marketing and where it's going to go to is a bit of simplification. So kind of cleaning up the swim lanes a little bit with the retail media networks. They're not going to go away. They're continuing to get better. They're continuing to reach more touch points. We heard quite a bit about, they're now digital out of home. You're hearing Walmart's putting, I believe, TV and radio back into stores as a part of their reach campaign. So they're finding more and more outlets to help surround sound the consumer, which is good, but again, it's going to get muddier and muddier with a lot of the national things. So I think there's going to be some simplification that needs to go on in how the media plans are being constructed and what's going into them.
Yeah, for us, very similar to what you say, Jeff, is we'll see retail brands coming into our ecosystem from different directions, and we can't really understand if it's from the agency or from the retailer directly. And what we recognize then is that sometimes there's overlap. So your partners are buying the same supply. In many cases, you're bidding against each other. And in the programmatic world, we call that supply path optimization because we love acronyms. So it's SPO for anyone who hasn't heard it. But that requires partnerships. It requires all of us to sit at the table and really think about this. And how do we bring the brand closer to the content so they can make sense of the optimal path or optimal swim lane, like you said, Jeff. Otherwise, it's constantly always competing for the same thing and outbidding one another for the same audiences as well. So there has to be some level of unity around this, but also some level of individuality as well. But we're figuring it out, and I think it comes back to the right partnerships and the right people sitting together and figuring things out.
Yeah, I think SPO is going to be a big thing in the back half of 23 and into 24. I think that's really where the opportunity lies, is getting closer to supply partners and keeping things clean.
We hold our partners accountable, like DSPs. Some will do this where they will cut off supply where it's resold or given out through other marketplaces so that it just becomes cleaner. But it falls squarely on the responsibility of the agencies as well, who have these partnerships in identifying that path that's optimal for their brand. So it's it takes a whole village, really.
I feel like we're playing buzzword bingo.
Yeah.
DSPs, SPOs, programmatic. So talk a little bit more about programmatic, right? That's another one that is a huge buzzword in the industry right now, but also has challenges inherent in it, as you mentioned, bidding against each other. So how can marketers think about that differently in the future?
Is that for me? It's for anyone. For you. I raise my hand often about programmatic, saying that please do not judge it based on what was happening 20 years ago. It's come a long way. There's regulation, there's safeguards. We still have a lot to learn, and new emerging platforms are coming into surface, like VR and metaverse. These are new platforms, so we have to take a page out of the history book and do it right, take that learning and make sure we're not duplicating. So one of the major challenges I see when we talk to our brand partners is that they try to take and mirror what they've done in display and video and bring it over to new formats and use tech that doesn't work in that sandbox, for example. So that's another thing, like education, making sure that we're not trying to, just automate things and bring them over to a new medium. Lean into a new medium that is emerging, lean into how the user experience works, and then understand how you access that programmatically to scale. So the first ask is preconceived notions do not help us when we're trying to define this, but also programmatic has come a long way, so I'm defending it because it has a really bad reputation, but it's really meant to help enable scale, buying supply at scale using really proprietary and unique data. So there's a good and a bad.
Yeah, as InMobi and being a mobile programmatic player, we're definitely pro. We're fans of it, and I think CPG is somewhere in the mid 80% of all digital media buys are programmatic. So the crux of it is all about efficiency and effectiveness, which is what programmatic has led to optimizing towards, which is a great thing. But again, it goes back to some of the optimizations. Now, how do we make it good to great? So, you look at, I think CPG brands are going to help push this a lot because 22 was largely the year of price increases and 23 is largely the year of efficiency. So as they focus on efficiency, helping to create those buys more streamlined, focus on SPO, how do we make our programmatic go to the next level, get a little bit smarter, create, and certainly we're going to touch on data. How do we get better data in to help feed those systems in a consented way, in a privacy way, security and whatnot. But how do we blend that and make the efficiency continue to gain steam? And it's not just a cheaper way to buy media; it can be a smarter way to buy media by incorporating all those.
Maybe I'll add one comment about. So we also partner with publishers in the programmatic environment. And part of the challenge here, as you probably know, cookies have started to go away. So Safari channels have pretty much been sunset. Many marketers are no longer able to target in Safari environment. So what we've seen is publishers are starting now to reintroduce existing ideas so that DSPs like InMobi and others can actually still maintain the ability to target audiences in Safari environment. And so I think programmatic, as you said, brings this great opportunity for scale. And there are ways to still maintain data in a privacy compliant way so that programmatic continues to scale and is not hampered by these underlying changes that I was talking about earlier.
So with all of these changes, right, the world evolving so rapidly, what do you think are the top 3 challenges facing CPG marketers today? Jeff, I'll start with you.
Thank you.
Anytime.
Go, Jeff.
Top 3. I'm going to start with loyalty for all the reasons that we've talked about kind of leading up to this is around the economic pressures, the needs-based economy and buying that consumers are dealing with and the bombardment. So I think loyalty is going to be one of the key fundamentals. We recently did a study on national brands versus private label. National brand loyalty was around 72%. Private label was around 68, 69. So they're neck and neck, a lot closer than consumers might, or those across the industry might think. Next, I would say is going to be, there's been a lot of talk during the show here over the last couple of days about content. And I think aligning the right content for the right environments for brands is going to be paramount. And I think you're going to see there's the influencer, and now we're hearing the rise of almost negative influencers. What not to buy. You're seeing some of that content come out. So I think consumer control is a big component that's going to be a story that's going to continue. And then the addressability story isn't going anywhere. So there isn't a solve today. I know we're working on it, but the solve for addressability and keeping those safety and security of the private data sets, and CPG is largely first-party data poor. Hence, the retail media networks who do sit on the data have so much power. So I think there'll be some reconciling of all those worlds in creating that addressability and consented addressability across the ecosystem.
We didn't practice this, but my answers are very similar to yours. Very much back to loyalty, and then the content story, right? So thinking about loyalty is like, what are your consumers that are most loyal to you really interested in? Bringing them into the decision making on how to approach them and how to scale that so that you can sustain loyalty even during times of economic distress, like when we saw the interruption of the supply and what that does to consumer loyalty. But for us, we see that for a brand to be able to increase consumer loyalty, it's about listening. So yes, we look at the data, but we also look at their consumption habits, and that helps to bring them into the conversation. And then another thing that I think is a big sort of continuation to that is bringing back the content. I feel like with all of the data, we may have gotten a little myopic. We may have forgotten, at the end of the day, like how important it is to connect with content that's relevant to the consumer and understand why, and then bring in the data and then programmatic to scale it and enable addressability. And then I think to kind of bring that full circle, by using that tech and leaning into it, we can also take advantage of things like dynamic creative optimizations. And with like another acronym, DCO, Target did this well during the the situation that was happening around Black Lives Matter. They paused all their advertising and went dark in solidarity, and that was very valued during that time because they were able to use a lot of automation and addressable type of technologies to come into the conversation in a more mindful way. Whereas some other brands may have not done that and may have hurt the brand equity. So I think looking at that and being able to be responsive to your consumer, listen to them and understand them, really puts a lot of CPG brands at an advantage in kind of connecting and increasing brand loyalty. Because at the end of the day, I think that's what really takes us, far and for long. Yeah.
Maybe I'll just add one thing. AI is going to help, I think, in that area. Another acronym, I guess. I went in and asked ChatGPT what were going to be the main trends in CPG.
And what did they say?
Man, I'd like a show off of hands, if you agree with ChatGPT. But unsurprisingly, AI, you might call that a biased answer. The creator economy, sustainability, are likely to be trends that are here to stay in the CPG marketing industry. Metaverse, though, is still in its early stages, and its impact on the industry remains to be seen. Anyone agrees?
So this is the future of CPG panel. Any bold predictions for what the future looks like and what trends we will see going forward?
Well, I mean, what I hear, and I guess I can read the ChatGPT disclaimer, I don't have any ability to forecast, okay? Certainly, what I'm seeing is hyper-personalization is a trend that will continue to increase and grow. So that, I would say, is something that we're going to see more of. And again, an omni-channel engagement is going to be more and more important, and we talked about fragmentation. There's fragmentation among retail media networks, there's fragmentation in streaming, there's so many different platforms. And the ability to have a consistent kind of view of a marketer's audience is going to be essential to succeed there.
I think my prediction is that value-based and ethical-based advertising will become much, much more central, and more organizations that can enable that will surface, and then tie it back to the creator economy and the content, and then bring everyone closer together in this like wonderful matchmaking. So that's my prediction, but we'll see. The verdict's out.
My prediction is largely on the CPGs themselves and the CPG marketers getting much closer with the programmatic buying and the retail media buying and realizing the inefficiencies that are potentially there. And as the CPGs will get closer to that situation, much like they did 10 years ago with getting into digital media in the first place, I think we're going to see the push for a lot more optimization and efficiencies be driven across the ecosystem.
Great, thank you. So values-based marketing, 2023 being the year of efficiency. These are some great key takeaways. So thank you for those. And I think we have time for questions. Yes, all right, questions from the audience.
You asked all the hard ones, Linda.
Really? No questions? This is shocking. There will be no singing and dancing. At least not till later tonight. Catch me around 10. No questions? All right. Well, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
We really appreciate you guys coming here. Give them some love, please.